Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff Mosher, Adam Caplan. And if you can hear the excitement in my voice, it's for two reasons. One, we got the NFL draft coming up, Adam. We get closer, so we got a lot to discuss as far as visits and, where it's looking for the Eagles, where they stand in the first round. And I'm also excited, Adam, because as you know, and I'm going to let the listeners in on one of my little faux pas recently, did a little running the other day. I coach softball, and I was running in the outfield with the girls that I coach, including my oldest daughter. And I dared the team to beat me in a race. I said, if anybody can beat me in a foul pole to foul pole race, I'll give them a prize. All right. Well, guess what? I won, but I'm the one who came home with the worst prize of them all, and that is a tweaked hamstring, my friend. I'm an old man.
Did you get testing done, or did you just go to the doctor? Like, what did you do?
Nah, I just, right at the end, I could feel it. And the crazy thing is, it happened. We did a lot of stretching. I always make sure we stretch before we do anything. Some softball and baseball teams don't do that a whole lot. I do.
Good for you.
We had just done hamstring stretch, quad stretch, thigh stretch, everything, arms, everything. Nice. Then I'm like, all right, let's do our running in. And then right at the end, I just felt that tug. And when you feel that tug, man, you just in the back of your thigh, you just kind of know. And so it wasn't like a major one. I didn't like drop to the ground, but it's enough so that as the night went on, it started to feel more and more like a knot in the back of my leg, man.
Oh, it's tough. Now, did you have swelling the next day?
I didn't have it bad. I mean, I had tightness. It's still tight right now as we speak, but I did a good job, I would say, of getting ice on it as fast as possible. Iced it all night. Then I took a hot bath with Epsom salt. I sound like Joe DeCamera with my baths.
Yeah.
But, I took a hot bath with the Epsom salt, which I think worked really well. We have an Epsom salt that's got all sorts of eucalyptus and other, my wife has all this stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. Did it work?
I think so, because I didn't feel as stiff and tight in the hamstring area as I thought the next day, but it's still, the bottom line is it's a several, I cannot, do a whole lot of things that I would ordinarily do. And I'm limping and, I'm not running around. So I'm, I'm trying to get through it, but hey man, I won that race. That's the important thing, right?
you got the mid-40s disease, man. You're trying to be an athlete, and it's tough, man.
Dude, let me tell you, because this is on top of, I have I think a labrum tear in my left shoulder that just has developed from wear and tear.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had a rib cage injury about a year ago, a little tear there that maybe from lifting something. We were doing a lot of moving, and all of that is slow healing stuff. Those little micro tears take a long time. And if you don't completely, rest it takes even longer. And we're busy people. I can't rest. I can't sit at home and do nothing. Right. I mean, I got 2 kids. I coach. I'm running around. So I'm a beat up.
I'm with you,
right
man.
Now.
I mean, for 2 straight years, other than maybe a week or 2 per year, I've played tennis 3 to 5 days a week. So I've been pretty lucky. I recovered very well. I stretch. I didn't know anything about stretching until I asked friends, what do I do? I don't know anything about tennis. So anyway, long story short, I made it. What I try to do is 3 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day. I just try to space it out, get some rest of my body.
Yep.
I did something dumb. I did 6 days in a row. So I've had this recurring issue with my left shoulder blade, and it's not slipping out. It's just sore as hell.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was my right, I wouldn't be able to play. I play through it, but it's just so annoying. And I'm constantly going like this when I'm playing, just to get it straightened out.
Yeah.
But this is what happens when you get older. Things that when you were kids in your 20s, I know some of you guys listen are in your 20s, but as you get older, it's really hard. And you're right. The importance of stretching.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to any athletic trainer. They'll tell you the importance of stretching. Even if it's 5 or 10 minutes. I do it. When I play at 6:30 in the morning, I get up at 5:15, 5:20. As much as I don't want to do it, I suffer through it. I scream sometimes, I don't want to do this. And I go, just do it, idiot. Just do it.
Yeah. Hey, man, God bless you for getting up that early. That's amazing.
I have to do it. And by the way, before we move on there, I've never been a morning person in my life until I played tennis.
Wow. How about that? All right. Well,
here's why.
Best in you then. Mm-hmm.
Well, here's why. So the people that I play with, my buddy Chad Stender from 76 Capital, Chad gets up early, takes his kids to school sometimes. I guess he and his wife switch off. But
Right.
Chad wants to play early before he gets his day going. And I at first I was like, dude, I'm not doing this.
Yeah, most of us who have kids cannot play sports or do something recreational between 5 and 9:30 in the morning,
Right.
because
Right.
you're waking up, you're getting your house is crazy. You got to get
Right. I'm not getting up at 5:20. Well, guess what? I've done this now for 2 years, and it ain't fun. Well, I love it's fun to play, and I love the competition, the exercise, the therapeutic benefits, as they say, for anyone listening. I wish I would have done this in my 30s. You know, I'm in my 50s. I wish I would have done it in my 20s. Wish I would have waited, 20 years to lose 35 pounds, which I'm down, but it's my fault. You know, I should have done it earlier. But stretch. Before we move on here, folks, I am telling you, the value of stretching has never been bigger. I'm telling you, stretch.
Absolutely. Great word of advice. And yeah, man, you look good. I go look back at some of the old ITBs that we did in 2019, 2020, and I'm like, wow. And you don't notice it as you go through it, but man, when you look back on that, I'm like, oh wow, Adam really did shed a lot of weight
now.
Yeah, good job by you. You know what? You mentioned athletic trainers and therapy, and I read something really fascinating. So among all of our listeners, I'm hoping if someone's an expert in the field, maybe they can email us at insidethebirds@gmail.com or just, reply. But I've been reading lately that among the medical community, especially in sports, that icing, using like how pitchers use ice and all athletes ice after workouts and things, icing is not as recommended as it used to be. It used to be like, oh, you're going to prevent swelling with ice, and the whole rice thing, rest, ice, compression, elevation. But I read that recent studies have shown that ice is not necessarily, like, studies have shown that it doesn't reduce swelling as much, or is not needed as much as it once was. It's not as emphasized as it used to be. So let me know if people can let us know if they've heard that, read that, or also.
What I do is I get stretched. Speaking of stretching, I get stretched from the stretch zone. My friends at Stretch Zone, so 2 or 3 days a week. My hamstrings have never felt this good in my life. It's incredible.
Rub it in.
Well, no, but the key to it is, I didn't know anything about stretching until I asked my buddy Dave Spadaro about it from the Eagles, and he's a tennis player. John Clark, our buddy John Clark, plays. He's way better than I am. He's played for years, but the value of stretching, because you're talking about tightness as we transition here now to the draft and injuries and so forth. One nugget I have, the NFL told me, I talked to them at the owners' meetings. I meant to mention this. This was on my notes when I came back, but I'll mention it now. The 20% of all soft tissue injuries, when do you think those happen?
What do you mean when? Like, at what point of the game, or what time of the year?
No. Okay, my bad. Okay, I'll give you 5 A, B, C, D, and E.
Okay.
First week of the NFL season, 8th week of the NFL season, 17th week, OTAs, or training camp.
Boy, that's interesting. I would, trying to put thought into it, I would think OTAs, because people haven't been working out. They've been doing a lot of bodybuilding, but not necessarily stretching and flexibility stuff. So very early in the season, like that, or really, really late when you're tired and your body's a little worn down. So either one extreme or the other. Which one is it?
I got it right. That was my first guess, but I didn't get the weeks. There's no way I would have gotten it right. Within the first 2 weeks of training camp, 20% of all soft tissue injuries occur. Here's why. You got the right,
because it's so hot and they're dehydrated.
Right church, wrong pew. Yeah. Here's what happens. You nailed it when you said they're not. This is why they have the acclimation period. You can't get in pads for like 5 days. So the NFL goes to camps. They explain to each team, hey, here's the data that we have. It would behoove the coaches to not have these guys practice.
Right.
But it's hard to tell a coach, hey, man, you can't use this guy for a week or two. They want these guys on the field. It's a push and it's a pull and tug about what you want to do with these guys.
Right.
Because you want them to stay healthy, and you want them to be loose with their bodies. You want them to feel right, but they got to get on the field. So they've identified it. Now it's like, what is the recourse? What will clubs do with the data that they have? We'll see. It's up to them. The league can only give them the data. And another thing is, every NFL team will have tracking devices. The Chiefs were one of the teams that would not use them. They have to do it for training camp.
The Chiefs didn't want everybody to know how fast they run. I think they already knew.
No, they just I know it was actually our understanding was they just they didn't necessarily agree with they're not the only team with the use of data, the trackers, but they're going to have to do it. So that they just want to get this stuff under control because the Eagles, the Eagles of the new staff. Yeah, sometimes you start scratching your head like, what's going on here? But they actually had a good year for injury, like knock on wood, obviously.
Very good year, yeah.
Tom Hunkley and
Ted Rath,
the guy who they got from the Vikings, and the guy from the Rams, the get-back coach. What the hell's the guy? Little guy.
Ted Rath.
Yeah, thank you, Ted Rath. Whatever, because the Rams historically are the best team in the NFL for having the least amount of injuries, particularly on the injury report. It's some weeks they have none. It's like, which is unheard of.
Right.
So they're doing something right. The Eagles are doing something right. Kudos to them. Because, folks, if you're new to our show, Geoff and I did we had some great. Was it at the end of our second season, 2019?
No, that was year one, I believe, because I remember doing a show at the Market Tavern in Philly. With Billy there. So yeah, we took a deep dive into the turnover of the medical staff that was going on at the time, which had been turned over more than once.
Right, all the issues that players we had intel from players, a lot of agents who complain about the medical staff and inconsistent opinions and all this stuff. But talking to agents lately, they've kind of raved about it. They're pretty happy with their players' results, and plus the club. That guy Arch, the guy who's the specialist for analyzing injuries.
Yeah, I forget his name, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, so he's really good. So kudos to Howie Roseman and everyone. I know it's been an initiative for them. Whatever money they're spending on it, good for them, because you cannot spend enough money to make sure your guys are in the field. It's just after everything that you and I have talked about for the first 2 or 3 years, where it was absurd.
Oh, it was bad.
Right. And the Darren Sproles intel we had, it was supposed to be a 4-6 week injury, 4 weeks. He had a grade 2 hamstring strain. It wound up being 8 to 10. That can't happen.
Yeah. Yes, you're right about that. And by the way, a big important nugget. I'm not sure we discussed it in the last pod, but apparently Nick Sirianni is going to keep the same OTA schedule this year that he had last year. Now, if you remember, I'm pretty sure that because they released the OTA dates and they're similar to what the Eagles did last year, which was the Eagles had him early. Remember, he negotiated with the team through the COVID policy at the time, saying, please show up, because the teams were saying that they might not. He said, show up, we'll get it done. And I think they were the first team done with OTAs, and there was a long layoff, which, by the way, great for them, awful for ITB, because there was a lot of free time between the end of OTAs and the start of the season that we had to create content for. But
that's when we do the specialty shows. We do the contract show. We'll go through all of them. We'll have some specialty shows if they're done early, whatever the case may be. That's right. The NFL released their dates. Now, as you said, we're exactly 2 weeks from the draft. Right after the draft, you have the post-draft minicamp within the first 7 days. So we'll have some. I'll probably show up to that one. I like going to those, though. You can't really do much, but it's where I saw Jordan Mailata, and I could see it right in front of me. 2018.
The mountain.
He didn't know what he was doing. It's just ridiculous.
I think that was 2018.
18.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Wow, God, man, time's starting to fly.
5 years, man. I mean, it would be 5. Yeah, we're 18, 19, 20, 21. 5 years. Yeah, to think that he's going to get better is crazy, but that's the word they think is he can get better. So, wow.
Well, you know what? I don't think it's crazy, because I understand where they're coming from, because they were such a run-heavy offense last year, and there were some games where, like the Raiders game comes to mind. I don't think that was one of the games where he was playing right. I think he was playing left tackle, but it may have been his first start back at left tackle after he had to miss some games for injuries, and then he played right tackle when Lane was out. But either way, like Max Crosby got him pretty good. He gave up some edge pressures. So, and then if you look at the last 6 games they played, Washington never had Chase Young at that point. He was out for the year. The Jets don't have anybody on the left side that really rushes the passer. I'm not trying to take away. I'm just saying, from a pass protection standpoint, you want to see him really tested against the guys like the Chandler Joneses of the world, the TJ Watts, everybody. Yeah. So he still has to prove himself in that regard.
his issue is with his hands, as it was told to us that when he doesn't play at his maximum, there's some games where he was just elite, where he was nearly perfect. But when he has, let's say like when Jason Peters was elite, either 0-1 mistakes. Lane Johnson, either 0-1 mistakes most games. Let's say a good game from Malata is 2 plays you'd like to have back. Well, his bad games are like 5 to 6 plays you'd like to have back. And that's a problem because one of those you can get your quarterback annihilated. So he rarely has those now. But what our understanding is it's typically his hand usage because Stalin has a different way of teaching it. As Trey Thomas has told us many times, it's the catch,
the double underhand hooks.
I'm sorry?
Double underhand hooks.
Right. And you're waiting for the guy to come into you. It's not the usual, I get you first, whether you get me first. So anyway, but he'll get better. And just to think about if he's at a 7 out of 10 scale, wait to see. He might wind up being the best left tackle in football at a 9. The reason I say that is I don't know that he'll get there, but I know how much it means to him talking to people close to him. I mean, he's so coachable and doesn't get any better in Stoutland, so I wouldn't put anything past him to be one of the top 3 in football.
No, not at all. Not at all. Some of the best left tackles in football are getting up in age a little bit now, so it's time Trent to Williams. Like your Tyron Smiths, your Trent Williams.
Yep.
Laramie Tunsil's pretty good, right? I mean, he's a darn good left tackle.
Yep.
I'm trying to think who else comes to mind. I mean, Orlando Brown's a very good left tackle. I mean, interesting. There's a time I could rattle off like 8 or 9 guys, but there's so much fluctuation and movement now. Is Bakhtiari even healthy anymore? I know he didn't play at all last year, right?
Yeah, it's funny you say it. Yeah, because he had the ACL, and they thought they were getting him back, and then he just was not ready.
Right.
He played. I think he made it play 1 game late, and then he didn't recover well, so they shut him down.
Right.
No,
Rashawn Slater is awesome. He's good.
Yes. I'll tell you what. You have no idea how many teams missed on him because people make fun of us when we talk about the short arms. Well, those dumb teams who wouldn't draft him because of his short arms. I know it's only 1 year, but he was pretty damn good. And if your hands are great, and I understand, like if the guy's got 2 or 3 inches longer than your arms, you might have some problems every now and then with getting into you first. That's a fact. I get it. But this kid is so elite. You might remember his dad, Reggie Slater, played for the Timberwolves, I think, power forward. Or I remember his dad. But he's elite. He's really damn good already.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I remember we did an offensive line preview going to the draft last year, and we were talking about his short arms. And I remember saying there were guys I spoke to in the league who felt he was so athletic that he could overcome it, and that it would be a mistake because some people felt he could play guard or center because he was so athletic. He was literally the dancing bear with his footwork and everything like that. And he clearly, I mean, he plays in a division with a lot of good pass rushers. And he sees one every day in practice with the Bosa's over there. So, he's pretty good too. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with Jordan Mailata. Obviously, a great find nonetheless.
Yep.
So let's this week we got the intel with Greg Cosell came out. It's on the defensive line prospects for the NFL draft. I thought it was really fascinating because I felt like Greg was not as high on some of the guys who are constantly mocked to go in the first round, early first round. And he really asked a question that you and I were kind of wondering, and we talk about it again, is that if Jordan Davis came off the field in pass rushing situations for Georgia, which doesn't, as Greg pointed out, it doesn't mean he can't rush the passer. It just means that he didn't in college. But that's got to factor into your evaluation that you don't have any tape of this guy and his pass rushing moves.
So, Greg had the stat that what was it? He only plays 20 snaps a game, some odd stat.
Yeah, he has averaged about 20 snaps a game.
And when now
it's like a third or two,
right?
So a third or half of a game.
We're gonna find out why. I need to ask because when Greg said that, I put it on my notes to find out why. He's explosive, and you and I saw him at the. What dinner did we go to in Atlantic City?
The Maxwell Awards dinner.
Yes, and he lost a lot of weight. He's long. He's over 6'6". But folks, one of the things I love about Greg is, and it's funny because I love when sometimes Greg gets some flack because if you're an alumnus of the school or you're watching TV copy and they get some people really are very nasty to Greg. He doesn't. He's a gentleman. He knows he's right. So why would he even argue with people who don't know anything?
Right.
But it's funny.
They're usually just me anyway, just using surnames. So, but
Yeah, right.
those
Is that right? Okay. So you're Eagle Bob 12347. No,
one of them.
yeah, right. Exactly, one of them. But it's just funny. So he told me a couple weeks ago, hey, I don't know if you know this, but Jordan Davis really does not play very much. I'm like, what? Really? He goes, yeah. He goes, he noticed it. And then he got the snap counts. I was like, all right, great. Let's talk about it on the show. And he did. And look, there's a reason for everything. You just don't, a guy that gifted, you don't limit him. There's obviously some issue, and we're gonna get to the bottom of it. We'll have that for you, I promise.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, listen, Georgia has such great defensive talent. When we say there's some issue, it could literally just be that, again, he played heavier than what he was at the combine. He lost a lot of weight. They could have some kind of guy who comes in like a situational rusher from the inside who's just so dynamic. And next year, he might be one of the best players in college football for all we know, because that's how Georgia has been producing talent under Kirby Smart. But it is something you have to make the I learned in my scouting academy class that if something doesn't look right to you, you just don't assume, okay, he doesn't rush the passer, right? That's when, as a scout, you have to pick up the phone, call the program, call other team, call around and get the information on why that is. So it'd be very interesting to see that where he goes and what comes out about why he wasn't rushing the passer.
I'll give you an example. I was talking to a receivers coach. There's a wide receiver everybody would know of. The wide receiver does not want to be there's the team Z. He only wants to be the X. He only likes one spot. And it holds the team back a little bit, but it's not. The guy's a pretty high character player, so there's not much they can do.
Right.
But when I heard this, I did hear that the guy, despite his body type, didn't think he thought he'd be better at X and didn't want to move. So I asked the coach, I said, what is this true? He goes, oh yeah, he doesn't want to play the other spots. Doesn't help us, but we're not going to force him to do it. And he feels comfortable and he's a pretty good player, so we're not going to screw with him. But there's, as you said, though, the reason I'm bringing this up is there's always a reason. If you don't ask, you don't know, and you don't want to guess.
Right.
But Greg, I don't think Greg was the term of shot in the ass with Jordan Davis's tape. He's athletic, he's talented.
Yeah.
But it's not good. Look, if the guy's limited to 20 snaps, I don't care if they have 20 defensive linemen. The kid's too gifted to be only playing 20 snaps. There's got to be a reason for it.
There you go.
But if it's like you were saying, just rotation, okay, great. But like, I'll give you one more example before we move on. Remember Haloti Nana? He played for the Eagles. I don't think he'll get in the Hall of Fame, but pretty good player.
Mm-hmm.
When he came out of where did he go to Oregon? Wherever he went.
He did go to Oregon, yeah.
Okay. The knock on him from a personnel standpoint, if you watch his tape, is that he was lazy. He would take plays off.
Mm-hmm.
And if I recall correctly, he actually was asked this maybe after the draft by the Ravens media, or maybe at the combine, whatever, because it showed up on tape. Like, hey, you wear this, whatever. And I think he said something like, I know. I know that I could play a little harder on certain plays, but I'll be fine. And guess what? He was fine.
Yeah, he was pretty good.
Yeah.
He was very good.
You just have to ask, you have to obviously ask the player if you're in personnel, okay, here's the tape. We're showing it to you. And, these pre-draft visits, this is actually part of the pre-draft visit process. You can watch tape together in addition to getting medicals and meeting with everybody. You can't work them out, but you could get medicals. But anyway, you can watch tape with them. And if you see some stuff that you're not sure of, now's the time to ask, and you could get stuff answered. And they got to answer it. If the player's in your building, he better answer it. He better have a good reason. Hey, whatever the reason is, and then they have to decide, if you're looking him in the eye, do you believe him?
Yeah, no, that's a big part of it. The way the question is answered, what's behind it. Because I tell you, in this NFL, with all this passing and the need to stop, if I'm taking a DT in the first round and he doesn't remind me of Vita Vea, I might be looking at somebody else, because that's the guy I want. I'm trying to get someone who is and listen, I know he's a unicorn. I'm sort of being facetious here, but that's the model that I'm looking for out of my D tackle. A guy who lines up a D tackle, he can D end, he can stunt, he can tway. He's got so much athleticism. He can drop back. He's just got burst everywhere. That's what you're looking for. Not somebody who's going to be jogging off the field for 30% of the ball game. All right, so check that out. Greg Cosell, defensive tackles, defensive ends, and edge rushing prospects, because there are a lot of them, and we definitely expect the Eagles to be addressing this early sometime in the NFL draft. Also, Andrew DeCecco, his Draft Dream series continued. Awesome interview with Sam Houston State cornerback Zion McCullum. Crazy story. The guy's from Texas, goes to Sam Houston State, but he's a huge Eagles fan. And it just so happens, Adam, he's 6'3" and ran a 4.3 at the combine.
Here's a question for you. You've covered the league a couple decades. Have you ever seen so many tall corners? We know that at least a dozen of them play receiver in high school, maybe 2 dozen. Who the hell knows? Mm-hmm. This is incredible. Almost every corner we've talked about with Greg, and you and I on our show here alone, they're all over 6 feet. It's unbelievable.
It really is. There are a lot of tall corners in this year. There's one from, I want to say Fayetteville State, named Joshua Williams. He's another tall, like 6'2", I think, 188 type corner. I mean, there's just great length and athleticism in this class. So if you like to play those, whether it's too deep or Tampa 2s, like those big physical corners, this is your draft. So we'll see. And of course, we think the Eagles are going to, John, of course, I mean, goes without saying, Sauce Gardner has the length and the athleticism and everything. And man, this is going to be a fun cornerback draft. I really do think it's going to be interesting to see how these guys.
I'm going to have something when we get to the meat of the show,
right?
On corner, because everyone knows it's a major need for this team. They don't need just one; they need 2 corners by start of training camp.
Yeah,
we could play on the outside. I'm not talking inside. They need 2 outside corners. But I talked to a very high-ranking personnel source earlier this week, who broke down the cornerback group. I'd heard this before, what I'll say later, and then this guy confirmed it for me because I asked him. I said, "Hey, what do you think of this guy, this guy, this guy?" And it's always good when people are seeing the same tape and see exactly the same thing, and going through every single snap. Because when you're a first-round pick, you're not just going over this year's tape; you're going over the previous year's tape.
Right.
And if you really like the player, you might see every snap the guy played in college, all 3 years, 4 years, whatever it may be. And it's important. When you're first-round pick, you better know these guys left and right.
Yes, absolutely. Well, so let's get into it. I don't want to delay. I mean, we've got some cornerback kind of discussion because Steven Nelson, who played for the Eagles last year, and I remember he signed in June, right? When they finally signed him last year?
Late spring, yeah. Or early
late
summer.
Spring, something like that, maybe early summer.
Yeah.
He signed a 2-year deal. Amazingly, he got a 2-year deal, although I don't know how it's structured, but
yeah, exactly.
Signed a 2-year deal with the Houston Texans. So he will not be back with the Eagles as we predicted. My first thought when he signed with the Texans, Adam, was that it's a good spot for him, I believe, because Lovie Smith has always been a devout Tampa 2. I don't even think he deviates very much unless he absolutely has to. He's basically a 2 safeties deep. I like my cornerbacks to be physical. Then it doesn't matter if they run as well because I've got 2 safeties deep type of defensive coordinator, and now he's head coach. So Steven Nelson's going to be protected a lot and make up for his deficiencies by having that kind of help up top.
He's Tampa 2. He is Mr. Tampa 2. This is what he runs. I understand. I remember Cosell telling me this. He goes, even guys like Lovie will evolve where they play a little bit of man, but the bread and butter, the reason why they were great defensive minds, particularly Lovie in his day, man, when he was just dominating as a D coordinator or as a head coach. He's a pretty good head coach for a while. Not so much at Illinois, but at the pro level with the Bears. It was because of the way that they played defense. And Steven Nelson's his own corner. It didn't work. Like they let's put it this way: the Eagles got away with, as Avant and on Q&A, Jason and Quentin Michael talked about. There were a lot of plays where Nelson, the guy got by Nelson from the coaching tape, and they got lucky that they didn't throw at him. But the Eagles coach to Nelson's limitations. He's just not fast. He's shorter than you like. He's super competitive and tough. I remember Cosell for years would rave about him, how tough he was and how gritty, but he just doesn't have any speed. And in this league now, you don't have to run in the 4.3s. That's not the point. The point is you got to be able to move. Even if you run in the 4.4s or actually in 4.5s, as long as you can move and run with the receiver, you're fine. But the fact of the matter is, it showed up on tape that he just didn't run well enough. And the only thing that surprised me of the guys they brought back was really Barnett, 96, whatever number he is.
Right.
Just because what is he really? He's been inconsistent. Why not go in a different direction? But they know him, and I still don't believe what Sirianni said. I was shocked with how. I mean, I know people are making
loves Derek Barnett.
Yeah, mine was only that. It was like
Smart, high football intelligence. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he might, but the dumb penalties makes you scratch your head. That's why the fans got all over him for that comment, and I was with them. But they know him better than I. But the fact of the matter is, with Nelson, our intel was that it was not completely out of the question, but it was unlikely because of where they're at corner. They need someone younger. Not that he's old, 28, but they like to get younger. They need more explosion at corner, faster, younger, better. Nelson's made it in the league because he's a tough, smart guy, gritty, but he's just not good enough. And I know Nelson, when he came on our show, he talked himself up, and there were some weeks he played better than others, but he wasn't good enough. And now the Eagles have a major need that we didn't know this opposite Slay. It's a two-pronged issue. They don't have a number 2 corner. They don't have number 2 outside corner.
So here's what I don't like about that situation, right? I don't like they're this close to the draft without having at least. And I know they did this last year, but I don't know that you'd say it was great last year. I mean, their defense still has the same questions this year as last year. So I know there are some names out there. Steph Gilmore is still out there. Joe Hayden's still out there. Trey Waynes is still out there. I mean, they can still get a guy after the draft. I understand that. But when you go
Nelson,
into
just going to say, Nelson signed July 28th. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So it was late summer almost, or midsummer that he signed. But when you go into the draft with just one viable corner in Darius Slay
on the outside,
and on the outside, right? And listen, I know that Nick Sirianni did a nice job talking up the Tay Gowans and the Kerry Vincents, and of course Zach McPherson, who barely played last year, and Mac McCain's of the world, but they don't believe that. They know that they need a corner, right? And nobody should buy that line either. None of those guys should be a starting corner if they play today.
They're fours. They're number 4 corners.
So I don't like that they're going into the draft with so thin there, because to me, it almost forces them to say, we really need to get a corner in the first round or second round. And I'd like best player available. I mean, I think you should take the best player and not feel forced. However, the cynic in me, Adam, who's been criticizing this team for not drafting a corner in the first round in 20 years, says, well, maybe this is their way of making sure that they don't keep making the same damn mistake year after year. Maybe this makes them take the corner that they've needed to take for a long time now. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out why they would really leave themselves this bare going into the draft. But maybe
that's
it will.
Good question. But so right now, the next question is, well, what does this mean for this football team? They can't line up today. If the season started today, I know it doesn't, but I'm just giving y'all a look of where they're at. They can't line up. They can't line up. They have Slay, and they don't have anyone opposite him. Those other guys are number 4 corners. That's what they are until they're proven otherwise. Yeah. They're not even a third corner. They haven't shown that they could be on the field when when a team goes 10 personnel or 11 personnel, which is 3 or 4 wide receiver sets. And let's say, well, you don't have a number 2 corner opposite Slay, but let's say they go 10 personnel. Who's your third outside corner? You don't have one.
Yeah, and it's not like they're so deep at safety where you could use those hybrid safeties to play nickel corner.
True.
I mean, you're in trouble. Right. Again, you're right. They're not playing today, but that just gives you an idea of how thin they are.
Yeah, so you're right. It's funny you say that. You said a couple minutes ago that almost all their needs to start free agency are still their needs. They're really, honestly, nothing. I don't think anything's changed. So let's go through this. So, all right. So I talked to a very high-ranking NFL source from an NFC team earlier this week. We were exchanging some notes, and I said, "Hey, I'm sure you've seen the top corners of the draft. What do you think?" He goes, I don't know what you've heard from other people, but Gardner is so special. I said, what do you think? What do you know about him? He goes, length, high FBI, functional football intelligence. Hands are like he'll grab every once in a while, but that's fine. It's no big deal. J.C. Horn, by the way, for the Panthers, who was drafted by the Panthers, had that issue coming in.
Yep.
You got it cleaned up, okay? Which we talked about last year, and Greg Cosell told us that when we did stuff with him last year. But the guy, and I said, hey, Stingley's pretty good. He goes, yeah. He goes, it's not close. He goes, Stingley's a good football player. He said, if your team that needs a corner, he'll be the second corner. And he goes, I got to tell you, he goes, I think the media is wrong here. We don't like the corners as much as the media does. Like I said, don't you think it's deep? He goes, yeah, it's deep on a bunch of number 3, number 2 corners. So there aren't a lot of number 1s. I was like, oh, okay. I said I hadn't thought of it that way. But
Yeah,
okay.
that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. So he just said that Gardner has no weakness. He said Stingley's tape is inconsistent. The good is very good. Gardner does not have bad. Not that Stingley has bad tape, but the inconsistent tape, you won't see that from Gardner. That's the difference.
I tell you, the one thing about Gardner, I think we mentioned this last show, is that the guy defends the crossing route as good as I've ever seen anyone in college do it. And that's a hard route to defend because it's kind of obviously it's a shorter pattern and the receiver just breaks toward the middle, and all you need is good timing with the quarterback to just be able to catch that ball. And a lot of guys catch them and aren't able to make the turn up the field and run because the corner has good closing speed. But Ahmad just takes it away. I mean, that's really, really hard to do.
Incredible for.
He's
and
like
remember,
right there.
what is he? What is he? 6'3"? Let me get his official height. Well,
Yeah, 6'3". I mean, you can't use the sideline as your friend there. I mean, it's a really hard route to defend.
So I remember when Bill Polian came on one of our shows the last couple of years. In fact, we're going to try to get him before the draft. I don't know if we're going to be able to, but I just know his issue with super long corners is they have trouble flipping their hips.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, that's why Richard Sherman was so good, because he could hand off in their cover 4. He could hand off because you're only covering an area and you hand off.
Right.
He goes, if they're playing man, he just would have these guys 6'3", 6'4", though he's a former receiver.
Mm-hmm.
They would have trouble transitioning. And a zone defense is perfect for the guys because you're not asking them to cover the entire field. Right. Sauce can play in anything. You'd want him to play more man than zone. He's so special that you don't want to say like he's the perfect prospect. Nobody is. I'm sure you could find some snaps that you'd like to have back.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a elite player at an elite position. It's a top 4 position on a football team. And you need these guys. And Slay, by the way, he's 31 now, right? I think he just turned 31 in January.
Yeah.
So players have told us for years, no matter what position is, you lose your legs in your early 30s. So, and I know, and you're not wrong about what you said about the Eagles. You don't want to force the corner, but how are you going to go against it? You said it earlier. Any team that passes, how are you going to slow these guys down? Like you could go get a Trey Waynes or a stopgap guy. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But what are you doing to build? The draft is not about now. It's for the future. If you get something now, great. If you draft Sauce Gardner, if they made a massive trade up and got him, great. You've got now and the future because he's elite and he's ready. But there aren't a lot of players you could stick in and say, you know what, he's ready to go. There's just not a lot of guys at corner. There are guys where you like them, you think he can. Sauce Gardner, there's no debate, there's no thinking. He is elite.
Sometimes I'd like to know more about sort of the valuation process by player and position that the Eagles use, because I think back to like 2017, we did the draft show. The draft was here in Philadelphia.
Oh yeah.
Eagles took Barnett, which they clearly needed at that time, a young defensive end, and that's a position that they clearly put a lot of investment into, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think the next pick after that was Marlon Humphrey, if I'm not mistaken. And I would love to know exactly how they had both graded, if it was close. Did they just go with the DN because that's the type of team they are, or do they not have a good grade on Marlon Humphrey, which is hard to believe? He's had a great career at Alabama, and he's become a really good cornerback. So do they objectively look at themselves and say, do we always favor the D lineman over the secondary player? I wonder if they objectively do that.
You know, that's a great point. It's funny. When did Joe Douglas come to the Eagles? After the 17th draft?
He came after the 2016 draft.
Okay.
17 was his draft. Yeah.
Okay. We know that Douglas and Howie Roseman, they were on record. They both loved him. I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
He's been an underachiever. He should be better than he is. We know about the production to beat Reggie White's sack record. I get it, but he clearly has not been anywhere close to as good as they thought he would be as a first-round pick. Had he been a third-round pick, all right, fine. This is what we took. Just not good enough.
Yeah, no. I mean, like, again, the outcome to me is like you're just mentioning. I mean, just whatever. It is what it is, right? But I'm so fascinated by the process. Like, do they really objectively say, do we just fall back on the D lineman because that's where we want to invest, to the point where sometimes we might think a really good D lineman is better than a corner just because he's a D lineman, like because we love that position. So it stands out to us more. So I don't know. I think only the people who work there would know. And
right. I love that. You know what? Well, maybe we'll look into that in terms of where they had Humphrey that year. But I get like it's like their stance at linebacker. There no team in the National Football League is more year to year at linebacker than the Eagles are. They literally take. I'm telling you, if you just go back by their roster each year, 1 year deal, 2 year deal, undrafted free agent. You just look at everything that they've done the last 6 or 7 years. Look, in 17 at work with Bradham, and he was Jim Schwartz guy from Buffalo, some guy. But overall, over time, a lot of patchwork at linebacker. They don't fit. They're not a forward-thinking team when it comes to linebacker. For whatever reason, they say it works. You and I might disagree. Fans disagree. We didn't say they draft 3 linebackers. How about developing one? How about developing one that's your own?
Yeah, that would be nice.
Kendricks was that guy, right? Who was the last guy who got a second contract? Linebacker.
Well, if you consider a second contract more than a year, because I don't want to give
not
TJ Edwards.
Funny. You got me, TJ Edwards. You're right. You got me.
No, I mean,
I'm saying drafted guy.
A drafted guy who got a second contract was Kendrick. Yeah, none since Kendricks. Nobody who's gotten a longer term extension. Yeah,
but that's the point. That's the point. Okay, now he was a good football player. They got that one right. But man, it's like corner. Look, we've been over this many times. They just have not, since Lito Shepherd. They haven't spent a lot of resources on it, and when they haven't really developed many guys there.
Right.
But it's now an elite position. You can't make it with the way teams are throwing the football now, and with all the quarterback movement and the forward-thinking younger head coaches who call plays. And by the way, watch Mike Kafka, who I'm told is going to call the play for the Giants with Brian Daboll. I get it. Daniel Jones is very inconsistent, but if anyone could get this guy going, it would be those two guys. And Kafka was the brains behind their passing game in Kansas City with Andy,
right?
The enemy of the run game. I'm telling you, man, you better have corners.
All right. Well, we know the Eagles need 2 of those. What else they need? They need a safety. We know that at least one they need a safety. Because as of right now, they would have to start Anthony Harris and Marcus Epps with Kayvon Wallace as their number 3. So they've got to get deeper there. Wide receiver, we've talked about, Adam. I mean, they need at least one, don't you think? I mean, they've gone after one.
Yeah,
all throughout the offseason here.
At least one. At least one. Yeah.
Well, at least, I mean, let's see. You really need like 4 good ones, right? I mean, you got Devontae Smith. You've got Quez Watkins. Well, you're right. If you don't consider Quez Watkins a definitive starter yet, and obviously we know the Jalen Reagor situation is in flux.
We'll talk about that in a second, Reagor. But
Zach Pascal's a slot backup guy. Yeah, they could use 2. Yeah,
they need 2. To me, Reagor's a non-factor. We know that. Arcega-Whiteside's a non-factor. Greg Ward's a non-factor until they make him a factor. So the only definitive information we have, we all know, Devontae Smith is their starter, as a starting wide receiver. They don't call him X and Z's. That's fine. I get that. But Watkins right now would be a starter because they don't have anyone else they believe it could start. So, yeah, right now they need 2. I'm not buying that on the outside. I'm just not.
Yeah, no. Defensive line still could use a tackle.
Oh, hell yeah.
Definitely, because Fletcher Cox, this will be his last year.
Yep.
Milton Williams, it'll be his second year. Got to see what he's got in year 2 before you determine whether or not he's got long-term starting viability. Plus, he may be used at defensive end a little bit. So you need a body there. Certainly need a body at defensive end. After this year.
Yes.
Yeah, at one defensive end. But after this year, Adam, most likely this is the last year for Brandon Graham. Last year for Derek Barnett. What does that leave you? It leaves you with Josh Sweat, right? Am I missing anything? Josh Sweat. I mean, Teron Jackson's going to have to make the team every year. So, I mean, you can kind of make an argument that they could use 2 young defensive ends.
Well, Brandon Graham.
Anybody? Am I? No. Okay.
No. So the only thing we talked about this last year, Sweat's the only certainty that they have past the season.
Right.
Bill Williams will play more inside than outside. Teron Jackson, they don't know anything about yet. Had some flash plays. Malvo, they don't know anything about it. A couple flash plays. Great. Nice story.
Right.
Good. Nice kid. We'll see if he can make the team. But the only thing you could say for the future is Josh Sweat. That's it. At DN.
Yeah.
And you can't count on Barnett to surprise us and play at a good enough level to come back for year 2. So you're right. They have to add one. They don't have to have 2. They have to have one. They need to come out with 2 D linemen for this draft. who are impactable, where
Yes.
you feel good about their whether it's but a small surprise is if the Eagles stay where they are, where their 2 picks are now. I don't see that happening. But if it does, I would put it. There's a good probability. Well, let's put it this way: one of their first 3 picks will be defensive linemen. I think, based on the way that this team thinks, I'd be shocked if it'd be anything other than that. With one,
Totally agree. Be stunned if one of the 3 wasn't defensive lineman.
Yeah,
I agree with you on that. All right, and as we switch to offense, Adam, I mean, certainly running back is a position where they need some bodies.
one more.
Miles Sanders comes back. Kenny Gainwell comes back. That's good. Who else? There's one more. Boston Scott, of course, came back. But they whether it's by draft, and I would think by draft, but again, the Jordan Howard role that was so important, I don't know who necessarily assumes that at this moment in time because they don't have a running back who weighs over 210 pounds.
Here's one thing I would tell you: with Miles Sanders on last year's rookie deal, there's been no indication they're going to extend his contract. It would it surprise you if they drafted a running back as high as the 3rd round?
Mildly, I guess it wouldn't. Yeah, just because this isn't. I don't see this as a type of running back draft where you really need to get one in the 3rd round if you're looking for a chain mover. If you got Miles and you have Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott's here, I mean, you can still wait till next draft if you really feel like you need Miles as replacement as far as a 3-down pass catching. Look, if they're in the 3rd round and who's the kid from Iowa State, Breece Hall is there or whatever, and he's that. Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. Then maybe, you go for it, but I wouldn't sit there and try to target one by any stretch of the means. Okay. You can get some guys, and I think by the day 3 that can help you play that Jordan Howard, help you move the chains role, but is younger, probably can catch some passes as well.
Rashad White,
call it the Jordan Howard role.
Yeah, Rashad White from Arizona State, who could do everything. Who's a big back catch, who was good at Senior Bowl. Yeah, you're right. It's definitely a position that they could handle. But Boston Scott is almost certain to make the team based on his contract structure, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. It guaranteed a lot of money of his $1.75 million, almost all of it, which shocks me that they would do that.
Yeah,
which tells you they like him. Okay, great. No wonder he resigned. Good for him. He deserves it. He's a good player.
Definitely.
Tight end, absolutely.
Tight end.
More.
Yeah.
One guy.
That I could see them going 3rd round tight end. I could see it. I wouldn't say I'm 80%, but I could see it because there's some pretty good ones who are just going to go in the 3rd round because that's where the original cluster I think is going to start to be. A Charlie Kolar or a Dulcich or whatever.
You're right. Dulcich, great. UCLA, who's a real athlete. That's a fair point. Look, we've been saying for weeks we believe they're going to add another tight end, but the thing they can't do is, then again, it's what the board looks like, but you don't want to pigeonhole the coaches you don't want this to be another Ertz Goddard situation.
Right.
Then you got to pigeonhole them into 12 personnel. Of the various reasons why the Eagles were trying to move Ertz by the draft last year is it just was not a healthy situation for the coaches being forced to. It was no different than when Peterson was here with the Eagles. No, he certainly won't have to do it in Jacksonville. They have too many receivers. It's crazy what they've done there.
Right.
But you just don't want to force this on the coaches where they have to play 12 personnel majority of the time because it's just you're basically dictating what your offense is going to have to look like when you have too high Goddard in the 2nd round is extended, who's really talented but needs a little bit more, be more consistent. And then if you're spending a tight on another one in the 2nd round, you have to play the guy. You have to justify it.
Yeah, no, you're right. You don't want to create that awkwardness, but so maybe we'll see. Again, I could see it happening in the 3rd, but also I could more realistically see them addressing tight end day 3 in the draft because there'll be some decent talent there.
Yep.
All right, I want to get into Jalen Reagor's situation. We caused a little bit of a firestorm throughout the week, so we should address it. Hey, man, this is a partnership, all right?
I know, but so what I was laughing at, I'm like, now he knows what I've gone through for the last 10 years.
Yeah. So we'll discuss it in a broader context. First, I want to remind everybody to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com, enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams for the fan, by the fan. That's their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com. On Twitter, it's at PHLSportsNation. And we'll pause real quick for another word from our great sponsors, including our friends at Sky Motor Cars. And if you head out to Sky Motor Cars in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them that Adam and Geoff sent you. You will get a great deal. Shout out to Sky Motor Cars. All right, so here's the funny thing about the Jalen Reagor news that kind of blew up this week. I wrote the column last week. It had come out like on Thursday, and it was a summary of something you and I had discussed in a previous pod, that as the Eagles sit out there and make their intentions known, they don't say anything, but their actions make their intentions known. They almost had Calvin Ridley in a trade. We saw what happened with that. As we both reported, they were in on several wide receivers in free agency that they just did, for whatever reason or another, did not land, whether it's Allen Robinson or Christian Kirk or Juju Smith-Schuster, who they checked in and checked out on, right? The people knew they were in on wide receivers. And so when you start to do the math, and again, they're checking out all the high-profile receivers in the draft. They were at Treylon Burks' workout. They led it, and they've brought some into the NovaCare. You do the math. You say, all right, well, there's one receiver that they might draft or could have signed or traded for. That's one. Devontae Smith is two. They've already said Quez Watkins. The coach said he's one of the best or potentially best number 2 wide receivers I've coached. So that's a third guy, right? And then they signed Zach Pascal. Now, granted, he's a slot backup, but he's still a signing. So that's 4 guys right there. You're starting to push Jalen Reagor down and down and down the depth chart to a point where, okay, normally your 4th and 5th receivers are special teams guys. They're not starters, and the optics and finances of having Jalen Reagor be a 4th or 5th receiver who doesn't even play special teams and makes the money that and sitting on the bench as a first rounder are not good. So you could see how it'd be sensible if the Eagles wanted to figure out a way or to unload Jalen Reagor if somebody called and inquired. And that's what it reported, that we knew that there were teams that were at least making the phone call to see where the Eagles were at with Jalen Reagor. And that's what we reported. And somehow that this week became like the biggest news as opposed to when I wrote it last week. But I think that it shouldn't surprise anybody for all the reasons that we laid out, that you got a bunch of teams right now that need wide receiver help. All right. And this is the time of year where teams are doing their draft prep, which is how we get a lot of this information, right? You're just trying to talk about teams and you wind up talking about the Eagles and you hear things, right? So they're doing their prep, and there's like 2 types of players who really come under the radar, right? It's a guy who's 3 years in, who's pretty good, who hasn't re-signed yet, like a DK Metcalf or the guy out Debo, right? They're 3 years in. They're eligible for a contract, and for whatever reason, they don't have an extension. That's when teams start calling saying, hey, well, what's it take, right?
And it's the Seahawks.
And then, and then you're struggling first rounders. Some guys who had teams liked, and for whatever reason, it's not working, so teams pick up and place the call.
Correct.
So that to me is the situation here. I mean, we'll see what happens. Calls have been made, and we'll see. What would you like to add to this?
Okay, let's just put this to sleep. The Eagles will not cut him. We're told they're not cutting him. It was never considered. They're not going to cut him. Here's the thing. You could – J.J. Thega-Whiteside, okay, they missed on that pick. We all know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he's a blocking receiver. That's not why they drafted him. It just hasn't worked out. Okay, let's move on from that. Jalen Reagor was drafted for 2 reasons. A, because he's explosive. Based on his TCU tape, okay?
Correct.
Greg Cosell's told us many times how much he liked him based on tape study. It's not whether he's right or wrong. It's irrelevant. It's based on what he looks like, what he projects to. He has nothing to do. He doesn't know medical. He doesn't know off the field. He only goes, here's what the tape looks like. Explosive receiver. I remember him saying he had a little bit better nuanced route running than you think. We know how he was arguably the nation's best punt returner.
Mm-hmm.
We talked to ad nauseum teams. Most did not have it was either late first, early second, but he was absolutely top 40 to 45 pick. That was not debatable. That was a fact.
Right.
We could argue whether he should have been a first round pick based on what we've seen so far. That's fine. But the kid's got some talent. For whatever reason, I don't know the kid. I don't know what's going on with him. I'm not going to blame the coaching staff here. The kid's got to take responsibility for not being as good as he should be. We know, because we were told this, and it shows on tape, that there have been plenty of times when he's been open, he hasn't gotten the football from the quarterback. That's on the quarterback. Okay, that's also a fact. the kid's got to be better. Hands, route running at this level has not been good enough. Play with more confidence. Enough of the social media stuff. Come and bring it, man. If you're this good, bring it. Let's see it. It hasn't happened. And there's nothing else we could say. I mean, I was super excited when they drafted him. I'm not going to run away from it. I was jacked because I knew how talented the kid was. Talking to a team that plays out west, that they had him early second. They thought there were a couple he had a couple flaws in his game, double catching, inconsistent hands. Needed to do a little bit better against better competition, but they liked the talent level. They said it was obvious because the tape showed it.
Yeah,
but we fast forward to now. He's not even remotely close to that play. It's like 10% of the player that the Eagles thought they were getting in terms of performance.
Right.
Because we saw him flash in year one. He had 2 injuries, by the way.
Right.
I have no idea. We know it was reported. We also heard that he didn't come into camp in great shape. That's on him. I don't want to hear the excuses. Like, dude, you got to get it. But the talent level is there. He's still very young.
Right.
Whether they keep him or not, if he's here, great. You just outlined he doesn't have a role right now. If he's traded, he gets a new lease on life. Good for him. But as you said, if he's here, he's going to make $1.8 million. It's fully guaranteed. That's not a lot of money, but for a fourth receiver who's not going to play, why is he on the football team? Now, the Eagles, our understanding is, as we speak here Thursday morning, they're not going to give him away. If he won't be traded for a fifth. That won't happen.
Right.
Fourth, I can't see it. Third, different story. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, if you're going to trade him and you want a third, again, I don't know what the Eagles are willing to accept yet. But we know a fifth won't get it done. Let's say for argument's sake, it's a third. You want it to be. You just wanted to make sure. You would like to get a good third-round pick. If it's this year, you'd like to be picking the top 10 of the third, not all the way in the back. Because in that case, you might as well just trade for a pick for next year. In 23, that's a third from a bad team that's rebuilding. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You just don't want to give the kid away. It's really definitely, I would say, of the 5 years we've been doing the show, his lack of performance is probably the most confusing to me. I can't think of another player who's underachieved like this in our 5 years.
Well, I mean, you could say Marcus. Oh, our 5 years of the podcast.
Yeah. We've talked about thousands of players.
Yeah, I mean, Andre Dillard's probably pretty close.
He's
close,
but his tape. By the way, his tape, the last whatever starts he got.
Yeah.
He put some decent tape together. Like he's not elite.
But no, you're right. But that's sort of like, we can't ignore that. I know it's like long forgotten, but Jalen Reagor's got like 4 or 5 explosive touchdowns for this team in his 2 years, going back to his rookie year where he had the 55-yard, the 73-yard punter. So he's flashed. Dillard's flashed. I get the feeling that if Dillard played a lot of games for the Eagles, you'd be like, you'd start to see some of the.
But what happened this past season? I don't understand.
Sidney Jones, you can throw into that list.
Yeah, he never did anything. Here's his issue.
He's actually done less than Reagor. Let's be honest. Sidney Jones has probably been but he's disappointing, right?
Okay. Well, hang on here, though. He's become a player elsewhere. Now, when I say a player, he's been an acceptable player, like an average player at least.
Yeah.
Reagor flashes a rookie occasionally. Where you saw, let's leave Justin Jefferson. It wasn't fair to compare them even the first year because Jefferson was elite, where this kid was trying to figure it out. At least he flashed a little bit. This past season, he never flashed, right?
No. No, he had a couple of plays here and there. He had a great catch in training camp. I remember that, though. The one-handed grab.
Right, but that's the kind of kid that the talent level he has. But for whatever reason, I just don't understand this one. This one has got me puzzled. No one in the NFL we've talked to ever thought that he would not be a player in the second year, because that's when you grow as a player. Like your second year, okay, it was rocky the first year. You improve the second year. You show that you should. Even if he was the third receiver. If he would have had 40 catches, but you see some good plays, you go, okay, he's starting to come along here. Let's see what happens to year 3. We didn't see any of that.
Yeah. Where's my man Laquan Treadwell? I forget. He's not in Jacksonville again, is he?
He went back, yeah.
Oh man, he's not going to see the light of day with all the wide receiver talent that they acquired this offseason. He's not going to.
Right, because they overspent on Zay Jones, they overspent on Christian Kirk. Marvin Jones is still there. Chenault's still there.
Yeah, so he's like 5th or 6th on the depth chart.
Yeah, well, but the one thing he has is size. He has size.
do they even care about size? The way they signed these, little guys who run, I'm not even sure they care about size.
Well, Christian Kirk's a lot smaller than I thought he was tall.
He's like 5'8", isn't he?
He's just over 5'10". He's 5'10".
Oh, is he that tall? I thought he was even shorter than that. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
no, I'm thinking of the other guy
Jamal
from Arizona,
I'm sorry?
Rondale. I was thinking of the other Arizona
Oh,
receiver.
Rondale
Really
North,
short. Rondale,
5'7". Even, yeah. He's built like a fire hydrant at a receiver. But it's just puzzling. It's hard because the draft is about projecting. You go, okay, here's where he is now. Any player, any drafted player in the first round, here's where we think will be year 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
He's not even remotely close there. And I don't have an answer for you folks. I wish I knew.
Yeah.
I
But a
can't get
lot
into
of teams need a receiver. That's the bit. A lot of teams need wide receiver help.
Sure.
And even though there's a decent number of wide receivers in this draft, I think, it's sort of like the cornerback. There's a lot of number 2 wide receivers in this draft. I don't know how many of these guys are going to be awesome number 1, 1,300 plus type yard receivers.
Well, Jameson Williams without the ACL could have been the first receiver drafted.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get into a couple of the visits in a second because one of them, this kid is special and talent, but we'll get to about why he won't go as high as he should.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can understand why teams who need wide receivers and they're looking at the draft and they also have other needs and they're thinking we may not come out with the wide receiver we want in round 1 or round 2 would pick up the phone and say, hey, Howie, what would it take for Jalen? What's his availability and things like that. So
they got to train him. They got to do the right thing.
I see. I don't get the sense that they want to give him away either.
No, I do, but I'm just saying
for all the reasons it makes sense to get to trade him.
It's not him and the team. You've outlined this many times. It's not going to happen here. Let's be real. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Probably not going to happen. All right, we'll move away from Jalen. That's about it that we've got on that. And the visits. You were just talking about the visits.
Yeah.
Who do we have lately? I know Gardner, we had reported, came and went over last weekend. And they were finishing up their visits this week, right?
Yeah, well, right. Well, you could visit up till the week before the draft, and then they shut you down.
Right.
And then you could work them out up till the day before the draft. You can't work them at your own facility, but you could have private workouts with them near their school.
Right.
There's certain specific rules, but they cannot be worked out at your own facility. But anyway, Wyatt Devontae Wyatt, according to my buddy Mike Rothstein from ESPN.com, because he covers the Falcons now. He talked to him, and the Eagles were one of the visits.
Mm-hmm.
And this one I knew about. We confirmed it a week and a half ago, and then it wound up happening. George Pickens visited. Here's the thing with George Pickens. Talking to Greg, he could agree with what I had heard. I talked to receivers coach. We did this last year before the draft. We talked to some receivers coaches and guys who coach in the league, and they gave us a lot of great intel. Pickens might be the best receiver for this draft, and I know Cosell loves him.
Cosell does like him, yeah.
So Jameson Williams and Pickens are probably the 2 most talented receivers. It's just that you got medical. Pickens was able to come back from his ACL injury, which he had in November of 2020. He came back for, I believe, the final 5 games of this past season. He's healthy. He had his combine workout. He's ready to roll here. So he came in, and they're able to look at his knee. That's very important. I believe he'll go in the first round because he's healthy. I say he goes in the first round. He's just he's got great size. There's so much to like about this kid. He's super gifted. The tape is fantastic before the injury, and at least he showed he's healthy now. So they got him in the building. They could look at him from a medical standpoint. You get to know him a little bit.
You're good with this because I remember last year you staunchly believed who's the cornerback who was hurt? Caleb Farley?
Yeah, we go in the first round. I told you would.
Yeah. You were like, it's adamant, and it wasn't just like one injury. It was overcoming. You had I think it was microfracture too, right? It was serious questions, and he went in the first round.
It was really bad. And then he tore his ACLs at tight end and feel terrible.
Right. But you said this kid's going to go in the first. I kept saying, really?
I listen. It wasn't. If you and I were drafting, there's no way in hell we'd take him in the first round.
Right.
But these teams have better information.
Yep.
And the information I got from a couple GMs was that he better go to a good team. One guy said he'll go because, and it was the same reason I used. I didn't know Tennessee would draft him, but it would be a team where the GM's pretty good. John Robinson's pretty good. He's willing to take risks. Look at the risk he took on Jeffrey Simmons' home run. Now, you want to say now it's a bad risk with Farley? I'm not disagreeing with it. Towards ACL, he had a bunch of injuries in his career. But if you're going to draft a guy like Pickens, you better feel secure in your job because he came back from the ACL. You better know that you better have great intel on where you think he'll be from his injury. That's kind of
I'm telling you, the Chiefs are going to prosper. They have back-to-back picks at the end of the first round. They're set. They're always going to be a Super Bowl team. They can make a luxury pick, whether it's Ojabo, whether it's Jameson Williams if he falls that far, or Pickens. I totally could see the Chiefs taking that gamble.
I am. Listen to this one. So the combine, right? I didn't think he was going to run. That surprised me. But kudos to him, and I don't know if the agent pushed him to do it, but he ran really well. 4.47.
Crazy. He's a big guy too, right? Yeah.
Yep, exactly. At 6'3" and a quarter, 195. I'm sure he could go up to 210, 215 as he gets older. Right. But he could run. He's smooth. He's explosive. Really good hands, and his 10 was good at 159. For a guy as long as he is really good. He did everything. By the way, his vertical could have been better. It was only 33. You like to be 38, as someone told me.
Same.
Watching the NFL, but his broad jump was really good at 10.5. But anyway, the tape is the tape. He's super gifted, and I found it interesting. Like I've learned over the years to not go crazy with these workouts or these visits because I wind up being wrong. When I think a team's going to draft a guy because they brought the guy in, I learned over time it has very little to do with it. They just wanted more information. Right. But the Eagles have a history. It's rare for the Eagles to draft a player that didn't visit. I will tell you, as someone who used to chart this stuff for 15 years, it's very rare that they didn't visit with him or visit him, like they brought him for a top 30. And if not, if they didn't if they didn't interview him at the Senior Bowl or Combine, or have him have the Combine interview.
Sure.
It's just they believe in getting in front of him, and that's good.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, that's going to wrap it up. That was a good, juicy notebook style version of Inside the Birds there. A lot that we covered. And we're getting closer to the draft. We'll have even more intel. We'll start answering some questions from our listeners soon too. So that'll do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. Big thanks as always to our producer, Hunter Brody. Check out his work. His channel on YouTube is called Sports Talk with Broads. He's got a great website called broadsmedia.com. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the bird.